Welcome to another edition of Giants Top 100 Players presented by Bud Light. I'm Bob Papa, and we've got a great show lined up for you. Bob Glauber, one of the panelists who helped create this list of Top 100 Giants, joins us here on this program. And Bob, over 5,000 men have worn a Giants uniform since 1925. Put this list together of votable players, and it was a challenge figuring out this Top 100, wasn't it?
It was a huge challenge, but you know, some of the players, obviously, you know where to place them. They're at the top. And then, you know, you kind of go through the list, and there are so many players who have been through here that are great. And you think of the legacies. I mean, I got a chance to go to Giants games when I was a kid at Yankee Stadium, yes, that long ago. So, you know the history of how many players have come through. These two great players have come through and really are at or near the top of that list. So, a great exercise in trying to figure out, who ranks where.
We're going to zero in on numbers 11 through 20, and it's kind of fitting because he wore number 11. Phil Simms joins us. Phil, when you think about the history of this franchise, and I know you're well-versed in it, to think about the fact that you were voted one of the top 100 players in the history of the franchise. When you think about that, what comes to your mind?
Well, it's awesome. The history of the New York Giants, it's tremendous for many reasons. What they did many, many years ago, and of course the fact that they've won Super Bowls too. So it's great to be part of it. I loved when I was a player, seeing some of the old guys come back. I'll never forget Tiki, training camp. We're there, and Y.A. Tittle shows up at training camp. And we're throwing the ball to each other. I'm like, man, this is so cool. Going with Y.A. Tittle. And, I just think about him and Charlie Connerly, the two other quarterbacks. But to see them and meet them and know what they did and to be part of it, it's a great honor.
All right, we're going to revisit that because Y.A. came in at number 12 in the voting.
Wow.
And Charlie Connerly came in at number 13 in the voting.
Wow.
So we're going to go back to that. Number 14 is Tiki Barber, the franchise's all-time leading rusher. And Tiki, like Phil, you have your name in the Ring of Honor. But now with this list coming out in the 100 years, it kind of brings a lot of things into perspective, doesn't it?
It really does, especially because I'm surrounded by all these quarterbacks, right? The icons of the franchise, so to speak. But, Phil mentioned something really interesting. When I first got here, I didn't know the history of the New York Giants. I grew up in Washington, so I was a then Redskins fan. And I hated this team, just like I hated the Cowboys and I hated the Eagles. But once you get to know this organization, and I think more importantly, the family, the Mara family, you realize how important it is when you turn out to be a good player here.
Right.
And you talk about Y.A. Tittle. For me, it was Frank Gifford.
Oh, sure.
Frank would come around, and I lived in the city. I was one of the few that lived in New York City, and he would tell me these stories. Oh, my house, my apartment was the epicenter, right? There was players there, the politicians were there, the police were there, like everybody was there. And I kind of wanted to be him.
Yeah.
He was an icon for me in so many ways, and to get a chance as a young player to interact with him was something that was special. It made me feel like I was part of that history, and then to now that I'm retired, be a part of it as well is something that's really special.
Gifford loved your game.
Yeah.
I mean, he really focused on you and watched you, and he saw a lot of you in him, or him and you. And I think he said something like, if I was just a runner, I wouldn't have made it. If you were just a runner, if you were just a receiver, you wouldn't have made it. If you were just a returner. But, you had everything.
Barber at his own 15. Tiki makes one man miss at the 20, outside to the 25. Tiki up to the 30, to the 40, has to be going, down the left sideline, to the 40, to the 30, to the 20. He's going to score. 5, touchdown Tiki Barber.
85 yards by Tiki, who's been on fire tonight in all areas, rushing, catching the ball, and now punt return.
And that was the similarity. And I think it's cool to kind of link it all the way back there with Gifford, and he was the golden boy, and he was Mr. New York.
Well, he was the first of the first,
yeah.
right? He was the first to do all those things, and then retire and do TV. Or actually, he kind of did it while he was playing as well.
Yeah. Frank Gifford, I said, I was talking to him once, and we were pretty good friends. I met him many, many times. I said, I'd like to hang out with you one night. And he goes, I bet you would. Okay, thank you. I was trying to get invited, but I didn't get invited.
Invite not forthcoming.
Oh, sure.
There's some parallels in your careers in the regards to Phil. You were drafted in the first round, but it didn't work out right away. You went through a lot of trials and tribulations before becoming the man here.
Wow.
Tiki, you were drafted in the second round,
Yeah.
and you were used as a punt returner and a third down back. And arguably, if you take a look at Tiki's career,
Yes.
the last 5 years of your career might be the greatest 5 years of any running back in the history of the NFL.
Number 21, Tiki Barber. The Giants say we are going to give the football to him.
They hand it off for Barber, running right. Big hole to the 30. There goes Barber in a foot race to the Cardinal 40, 30, 20, 10, 5. Touchdown, Tiki Barber! 78 yards! What a run by Tiki! He's having an all-pro day!
There's something about the people in this organization that make you feel loyal to it. And I think Coach Fossil, when he rests in peace, was one of those that had a real loyalty towards me.
Hey, 21. Great job, buddy. Hey, that's a hell of a job, man. That's a great job.
And he just kind of kept me around.
Right.
And Tiki, focus on being a great third down back. Focus on being a great punt returner, and the rest will take care of itself. And eventually it did.
Pitch right, Tiki. To the outside, can't cut it. Now hesitation move, cuts at the 10, reverses his field to the near side, runs away from one man. Barber to the 10, 5, spectacular touchdown!
Tiki Barber, a miraculous touchdown run.
That was a great game, man. I'm going to tell you what, man. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, man. I mean it.
Phil, what about for you? There were injuries. There was obviously the coaching change, and then Parcells came in, and the horrible season of '83. But you stuck with it, and they stuck with you.
Yeah, many things. It got off to a good start. I loved my rookie year. I just couldn't get over the weather, though. It's like, oh, my God. About mid-season, it's 30-mile-an-hour winds when you're practicing in the games. It's raining all the time, and I wasn't used to that. But that was great. But, yeah, getting injured probably saved my career here, I think. In
How so?
Well, in '83, Bill Parcells, his first year, he took it over, and he gave the job to Scott Bruner. And it's funny. I think as a player, you always know, right? And nothing shocked me. I knew. I can get a sense. I can feel it. And of course, some of the other coaches told me, so I really knew. But I got hurt. I finally came into a game to relieve him. I'd go right down the field and score a touchdown. The fans actually like me now, where this is pretty cool. And then I break my thumb really bad, really bad. I mean, I just like, oh my gosh. But that might have done it, because the rest of the year was a train wreck, if you remember. And it was so bad, I would have been a part of that if I was still the starting quarterback, and they might have said that's the end of it. But Scott Bruner finished the year out. It didn't go well. The record was, I think, 3-12-1. I remember that. And so the following year, everything changed. I was the quarterback. Bill Parcells became Bill Parcells. I mean, for real, he changed tremendously. He was in charge and leading, and it was awesome. And, of course, the rest is history. It worked out pretty well from there.
Yeah, I mean, and my first year covering the Giants was 1985. And it was the perfect time just to come in and, you have all these big personalities. You, Joe Morris, Bill Parcells, Lawrence Taylor, Harry Carson. What a room to come into, and was like, wow. And it was the perfect time because you had turned the corner.
Yeah, 84.
You win, you go to the playoffs. 85, you get another step further, and you play the Bears, and they got the better of you, and it was clear. And then that 86, it all came together, and then your Super Bowl run was, magnificent.
Well, I was a big personality.
You were a big personality.
Not in those rooms. You couldn't have been.
No, not even that. And in the course of that coach we had,
What was that like? I mean, because I think of the personalities from afar, from Lawrence to Carl Banks and Harry. It was a big, ego room.
Yeah, it was.
How did that work?
Well, it was awesome. That energy you get from all those guys every day.
Right.
The locker room was, gosh, I don't even know if you could do what we did that in today's world. I mean, it was out of control. That 15 minutes before practice, I would sit in my stool and just go, oh, please, don't anybody pick on me, because it was just, it was incredible. I couldn't even tell the stories here.
Right.
And so that kind of set the stage, and it was just, Bill was a tough guy. We practiced incredibly hard and all that. And, so I was kind of always sitting back and watching it. Yeah, I was starting to have even more success, but I never looked at myself like I'm a big personality in this team.
Yeah.
I might have been the personality in the huddle.
Because you had to be. I mean, you were
Oh, yeah, I was pretty good in the huddle.
You're directing the ship.
As O.J. Anderson once said, the greatest compliment I ever got, somebody, me, him, and Eli are doing this thing. And somebody goes, O.J., did you ever come back after a play and tell Phil that you were open? And he go, what? Blondie? And he just says, there's no way. If you said a word to him, he'd get out. And I go, was that bad?
I'm surprised to hear you say you didn't think you were you were a huge personality.
Wow, okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Did you take on the image of Parcells when you were in the huddle as you got deeper into
Absolutely. And if I didn't, he would, crush me for it. He really wanted me, quit trying to let guys, you don't worry about if they like you or not. They don't care. No matter what you do, there's guys in this team that are still not going to like you. Just lead them to a touchdown. Could you do that?
Yeah.
Could you be that? And then he would get on me because the O-line was playing bad.
Tell that undisciplined center we got to get his head out of his ass.
Makes about 10 today.
All right, 40 seconds here.
Unbelievable.
Is that my fault?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
now
it
you're a
is.
friend. You used to lead them. Now you're just a buddy. And, hey, look, his stories, I could talk about Bill for an hour. But the thing about him is all of his little sayings and everything he did, they were so true. Not only about football, but about everything. So,
Tiki, you guys go to the Super Bowl in 2000. You played in arguably the greatest game in Giant Stadium history, the NFC Championship game, 41-0. But then you start to mature as a team leader, and the team's getting better. 02, that team was a really good team. And then, 04, 05, 06, you're going to the playoffs. What was it like going from a guy that was part of the piece to being a central figure?
Yeah, I mean, life is a transition, and I think sports are just a microcosm of that in so many different ways. But sometimes you need something different. And I loved Coach Fossil. But when Coach Coughlin came in and he brought his staff, in particular Gerald Ingram, the details became so much more important, and that's what took me to another level as a player. It was literally little things like how are you mechanically carrying the football? I don't know. I just do it like they told me when I was 10 years old. Like when you go into contact, go like that. But he's like, no, it's actually wrong because it's exposed, right? Unless it's high and tight, vertical.
Oh my God.
Right? Unless it's your elbows down. And you cross yourself going into contact. I always tell kids now, the X will save you, right? The X will keep you from fumbling. It was something very tiny that changed my career. It changed my confidence so that by the end of my career when I retired, I just knew I was going to be good. And I mean, Bob, you probably remember these after some of these games. I was on the edge of cocky, right? But I knew I was going to have a good game. I knew I was going to have success. Regardless of what they were trying to do to us or who we were playing, I knew that we would all put it together. But part of that was the ownership that everybody had, from left tackle to right tackle to receivers doing their jobs downfield. And I know that Amani's on this list at 16, right behind us. And all of the big runs that I had in my career, you can go look at every single one of them. There is somebody 30 yards downfield making a play.
Wow.
On the 95-yard I had against Oakland, Plexico Burris comes and cracks the corner, then pirouettes, and then goes and gets a safety. And Amani comes from the other side of the field and blocks the other safety, so that I'm just kind of cruising. I'm like, I don't even have to work hard, right? Everybody else is doing the job with me, not for me, but with me. And that's why we were good. That's what Coach Coughlin preached. It was those little things.
Sure.
Like if you're too tired to go run on the field, then guess what? Somebody else is going to be in here.
And it was a tough transition with him.
Oh, really
'cause
tough.
He came in, and Foster was more of a player's coach. Players liked him. But Coughlin comes in, and it's tough.
Right, it was hard.
And high and tight, I will always look at you.
Oh, my gosh.
And high and tight. It's just the two
Yes.
words that turn things, and it's so simple.
Yeah.
And he made you hold the football when you went home.
Right.
You had to.
When I was at home, when I was doing the training test on the treadmill, when we were sitting in our meeting rooms, it was nonstop.
But to watch that transform into, and you blossom,
Yeah.
Statistically, and the fumbling issue was not a factor for the rest of your career.
Right.
It was remarkable.
Yeah, 59 in 10 years. Wow. 59 fumbles. Wow.
You know, Tiki,
it's a lot.
We all learned how to carry the football during that era. I mean, because I'd read it. It was in the paper.
Right.
It was talked about. I'm like, let me try that. Yeah,
Well,
pretty good.
the only time I became aware of it was, you remember Thomas George, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He sat me down in training camp, because in training camp I would just hang out in the lunchroom. I wouldn't go back and sleep.
Right.
I'm just sitting there eating a salad. He comes up and saddles up next to me and was like, "Tiki, you got a fumbling problem." I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about? I don't got a fumbling problem." He just pulled out this sheet that had all these numbers on it.
Oh.
I was like, wow, I actually do. But
Analytics.
at that time, I didn't know how to fix it. It actually started to manifest itself in my head and became like destructive, because I was thinking about it all the time. And I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And then this is why I commend Coach Coughlin and his staff. Like, they identified the problem, and then you fix it. Once you become aware of it, it becomes easy.
Yeah.
But at that time, I was like, I was in denial in a way.
It was nice to hear a sports writer turning around.
there you
Thomas
go.
George worked for the New York Times.
Yes.
But he was very close to the players, and
Right.
he got stuff out of players, and it's good that he reached you.
All right, I want to bring up a name that's part of this list. He comes in at number 16 on this list. You mentioned Amani Toomer, another guy that came in with a chip on his shoulder because he wasn't a first-round pick. He was a second-round pick. What was he like as a teammate? And he goes on to become the Giants' all-time leading receiver in catches, yards, touchdowns.
I swear, Bob, he always basket caught everything. Everything was in his basket because he could put his elbows together. And it's why he was a good punt returner. He never muffed them, because the ball would come right into the basket and sit there. And if you needed a big catch, you could trust that Amani was going to make it. And he was reliable. He was healthy. He was big and strong and powerful. And I loved being a teammate with him, because you knew what to expect every single time. And as a player, that's all you want, right? Give me the same thing every single day. And that was Amani.
And his footwork was incredible on the boundaries.
Unbelievable.
I mean, Chris Carter was one of the best in that era, but Amani was right up there.
Yeah.
Catch he had in the NFC Championship game in Green Bay at Lambeau Field was incredible.
Yeah.
And it was like the Broncos seemed to be his coming out party. Yeah. Remember, they were undefeated. They're defending Super Bowl champs. Kent Graham, you called it probably.
I did the game, yeah.
Yeah, Kent Graham throws it to him.
Blitz on, Giants get it. Graham throws deep down the right side, looking for Toomer.
Touchdown!
And he's caught by Toomer, but they rule him out of bounds.
What's this touchdown?
He's in.
He is in. Touchdown! Yes! And the Giants win. They beat that undefeated Denver Broncos.
Hey, my man. I told you it was going to come through, man. Way to make me famous.
And that seemed to breathe life into Amani's career, because he wound up beating the Broncos again with Eli, and you played in that game, obviously. That was an emotional game, as Mr. Mara, the last days of his life. So pretty impressive, his kind of ties with the Broncos.
Yeah, Amani he doesn't get the credit he deserves. I mean, it baffles me when I rethink of our joint careers. He played a year before me and a year after me, or actually a couple years after me. He never made the Pro Bowl, and it makes no sense.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Because of how reliable and resilient and just dependable he was as a player. Like, it's those little things that get lost to the national exposure of teams.
And you know, Amani played in an era where receivers became so larger than life in the game. T.O.
Right. The diva.
And there were big ego receivers, right? They were great, talented, and Amani he was very understated. It wasn't his personality. So he was quiet about himself, and I think it probably hurt him recognition-wise.
Right.
The other thing with Amani is he made a speech to his team before the 2007 playoffs.
Okay.
He had been to the Super Bowl in your team in
2001.
And he says to the players, guys, and this is before the Super Bowl, listen, I've been here before. You have to take advantage of this moment, because if you don't, it'll live with you for the rest of your life. You will never live it down. You just have to seize this moment. And I remember writing about that, and it was remarkable, and it really made an imprint on me.
Right, I mean, that's important. I mean, I remember having this conversation with Strahan, and it was near the end of my career. I ended up retiring the following year. It was in the off season, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get another shot, because I didn't know where the team was. Right. We'd gone 10-6, and then we were 8. It was bad. Like, Eli's first year was bad. Then we had a winning season. Then we had an average season. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to get another shot. And then ultimately I retired, and he's like, yeah, I don't know either. And he hung on for one more year, and he got another shot, which is the year you're talking about.
That whole thing, you get your chance. I can't imagine my life if we wouldn't have won the Super Bowl. I know it would have been different, and, you know, I can carry things pretty well. I'd still be angry about it.
Yeah.
You know, just it is amazing. I talk to guys every now and then that had their chance and they didn't win, and I feel for them because I think it is what you said. It's almost a burden to carry.
Sure.
You know, just depends. But those kind of sports, it's great. The highs are the super high, but losing a Super Bowl, man, I don't know what to say. It's like you said, you got to hope you get one more chance.
It helped that we got our butts kicked. So if it was close, it would have been. It would.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That was a special team you played against.
Oh, they were good.
They were pretty good. 0-2 though. That team could have won a Super Bowl. The 0-2 team, if not for the Niners meltdown. But we're not going to talk about the negative here. You know, we talked about Amani not being self-promoting. Number 18 on this list is Mark Bavaro. Talk about not self-promoting.
No, yeah, man, a few words. You know, as I always tell people, it was just a few words for me too. But I always tell this story, and it's so true. It's hard to say this because it comes off as bragging, but we created the back shoulder throw. We created it.
You and Mark.
Well, our team.
Oh, God.
We had small receivers, so beating people down the field. So we were a tremendous back shoulder team throwing. You know, I'll never forget, we're playing the Steelers in a preseason game. We're watching the film of the game, and Parcells goes, "Why didn't you throw it to Bavaro?" And I said, "He's covered." And he goes, "Sims, you don't understand. When he's covered, he's open." And, you know, I don't know. I guess I knew the Bill Parcells language, and I go, he's right. So Mark would run down the field. If the guy was inside, high, low, whatever, I knew where to throw it, and he, you know, of course, he's got hands about this long, so he was a great hand catcher. And I don't remember him dropping those passes.
No.
And we did it. I went to the Pro Bowl in '85, and John Robinson, I put in some of those plays that I'm talking about with Mark Bavaro. He goes, "I never understood that with you guys. That is so dangerous." Not if you do it every day. And I did it in that game and got the MVP. And I put the plays in, which was awesome. But yeah, Mark was phenomenal in that way, that I could throw it high, behind him, in front, whatever. He knew the adjustments, and it really helped change my life as a quarterback. And it perpetuated itself in 1986. Remember, we went down and scrimmaged for days with the Atlanta Falcons. We had like a team thing, and I threw like 15 touchdowns in one period because I was throwing back shoulders, and they'd never seen them.
You guys were innovators in a lot of ways then, because think of the small receiver in today's game.
Yeah, no, we had small receivers too. They were, and you know,
Bobby Johnson.
Bobby Johnson, yeah, just great feet, both of them. Bobby Johnson, he wasn't fast, but he's another one. He was never dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And Lionel Manuel had the greatest feet maybe I've ever seen. His feet were so quick, and he could do everything with them. He turned, corners around right and left all the time.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's unique because back then you could kill wide receivers.
Yeah,
like you could hit them.
Yeah, I let him into trouble a few times.
And just going back to Mark though as a teammate.
Yeah.
Right? He's legendary. He's on this list for a reason. Fans loved him. What can you share about him that maybe people don't know?
Well, I think the play in San Francisco, which in 1986 on the Monday night game, just explains everything about him. His will, his determination, his talent.
Complete to Bavaro, down to the 35, still on his feet to the 30, down to the 25, down to the 20. He's got 4 men on his back and gets down to the 17.
And, you know, Mark was big for a tight end back then. You know, big frame, long arms, huge hands, all that, could block anybody, a great run blocker. Just he had all of it. And, you know, he was just a great personality for the team. And it is true, he did not talk.
Hey, he's a stone-faced, that Bavaro now. You know what the hell he's thinking. I'd hate to have to fight that son of a gun.
Why was that great?
Just because the aura around him.
Oh, I see.
You know, it was there, it was real. And we knew every game that he was going to be a big part of us winning or losing with his blocking or catching the football. And he broke his jaw one year. He did not miss a game after he broke his jaw. But none of us really knew because he didn't talk anyway. And it's true. And then, you know, there he is on the plane after we won a road game. He's eating baby food. You know, it was incredible. Who could play in today's world with a broken jaw?
Right.
Who would let you?
Yeah, you're right. He wouldn't. Doctors wouldn't.
Yeah.
Smartly, probably.
Toughest guys. The first year of training camp. Couple of weeks in, he got sick.
Right.
He got dehydrated, had to go to the hospital, had to get IVs. Shows up in the afternoon before practice, and Parcells says, "What are you doing here?" He knew he'd gone to the hospital. I got practice. And he practiced. And you kind of knew. I mean, this guy wanted it, and he had the will that was really hard to find.
Yeah. Well, I could tell so many stories about him. I think it was 1985. We're playing Houston. The game is over. We're winning. We're going to call a play. He goes, he never talked in the huddle. He says, "Don't call that play. Call this play." And I said, "Well, why do you want that?" He goes, "I want to hit this guy one more time." And that was like, okay. So I changed the play, which I never did in my whole career once. But I did it for him, and because he wanted to fight the guy one more time.
Did it work?
Well, they got in a fight.
I got to tell you, he has like an aura about him.
It's unbelievable.
This image. Like he exists as this iconic, tough man.
Well, the play on the field was everything. You know, that play, like I said, I watched the play, it almost makes me cry. He caught that pass over the middle against the 40. It just exemplified who he was. The fact that he played with the broken jaw, which we didn't even know. And he was just awesome. Our offense centered around him. Our passing game was centered around Mark Bavaro. And we all fed off on it. And we tried to get him the ball as much as possible. And, you know, of course, there were a few times. We were playing the Cincinnati Bengals in '85. I don't know how many passes he caught, but it was a lot that day. And I actually saw him kind of walk back to the huddle once with a smile, because even he knew this is like, it's a tough game. We might not be winning, but damn, I'm catching.
Didn't you throw for
500 yards?
Yeah, well, that's easy to do when you dig a hole for your football team and try to get out of it.
I want to ask you about number 17 on this list.
Oh, who's that?
Carl Banks, two-time Super Bowl champion, and drafted in '84 in the first round when your roster wasn't begging for linebackers. You were loaded at linebacker. And he and Bavaro obviously practicing against each other every day. They were talk about those battles between Carl and Bavaro.
It was unbelievable. Between Mark Bavaro, Andy Hedden, Carl Banks, Lawrence Taylor, Byron Hunt, Harry Carson, Gary, whatever. But I was like, oh my God, they got to come out to practice every day and do this, because it was a fight. The defense was mad because they weren't getting enough playing time, but there was they would literally get in battles every day. And you talk about Carl Banks, always brings this first thought in my mind. What do you think that is? Why is Carl Banks not in the Hall of Fame? And you too.
Right.
Okay, and I don't say that. No, not me. I'm not being shy or humble. You can say it, but I don't bring myself into that because I don't believe it. But, Carl, just go back and watch the 1986, if nothing else, just watch the playoff run. He was unbelievable. He was the best player in the field. The best.
Watch Carl Banks, 58, coming from the outside. I think towards the end of the season, he's become one of the best players in the whole league. You can't run at him. You say you want to run away from Lawrence Taylor, that's good, but you have to run into him. You're not going to run outside against this giant defense.
He might have been the MVP if you didn't.
Probably.
Right?
You're right. I mean, he just had such a great knack. And, I think even now when I see Carl go, oh my God, you're a big dude. I mean, we had some big damn linebackers.
I'd be scared to play in that.
Everybody was 6'4" and 5", and all of them, most of them could really run. And they were mad as hell, too, at the world. I don't know.
I wouldn't have worried about them tackling me. It would have been blocking them.
Oh, yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah, and Carl was great at that,
because they're heavy. These guys were heavy. They just looked heavy.
They were.
Thick-bodied.
Yeah.
Anthony Munoz paid him one of the greatest compliments of all time. He said he was a Hall of Famer, Cincinnati Bengal left tackle. He goes, the best outside linebacker I ever played against was Carl Banks.
Wow.
Because of his ability to handle the run, pass rush, deal with tight end, everything.
Everything. Just to exemplify that point would be John Madden, who loved Lawrence Taylor, of course. Everybody did. Of
course.
And John loved talking about him, and rightly so. But one day on a telecast, I happened to see the telecast, and he says, boom, boom, Lawrence Taylor, but right now the best linebacker in the NFL, in my opinion, is Carl Banks.
I think over the long run, Carl Banks is going to be the best player in this Giant defense. I think he's going to be there for a long time. I mean, he can do it all. I mean, he can cover, he can run, he can tackle, he can do everything.
Wow. And, you know, that takes something to say.
Right.
Because you're saying it against Lawrence Taylor, and that was John Madden's favorite player, probably of all time.
Right, and Harry's on the team, too.
And Harry's in there, too.
I think that was it wasn't overshadowed, but, you know, when you have those guys with him, they're two Hall of Fame players that, you know, you say, well, is Banks a product of that? No, he was not a product of the players around him. He was a great player in his own right.
Absolutely.
Speaking of great, I know neither of these two guys had any interaction with him, but number 15 on this list is Tuffy Lehmans. Played for the Giants in the 30s and 40s, and was really a unique player because not only was he a runner, but he was a passer. He was in the first NFL draft. 1936 was the first year of the draft, and the Giants drafted him. He had, 5,000 combined yards of rushing and passing, and was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1978. And Mr. Mara personally scouted him. He was like 17 years old, and he was scouting him, and he convinced, his father to select Tuffy Lehmans, and the guy went on to have a Hall of Fame.
It's the first player that Wellington Mara scouted.
Is that right?
Really?
Yes.
At 17? Was
at
he in high
17,
school?
well, I mean, he was a ball bite.
Yeah, he was either just at Fordham or was on his way in. But yeah.
And he saw Tuffy Lehmans. He transferred to George Washington, and he was a star there. And Wellington Mara had conviction on him when he saw him. And back then, you're playing in the single wing, so in his position, he's running the ball, he's throwing the ball, he's catching passes. So it's a very. I'd like to see the single wing in today's game. There's some things that people could do with that, but you don't have that kind of player anymore that threw touchdowns and ran for touchdowns.
Back then, they were probably more important than the quarterback.
Yeah,
as far as throwing the football too, which is really amazing.
Yeah.
And the thing,
the only one is probably Taysom, right? Hill.
Yeah,
Hill.
he is like
probably the only one in
Taysom Hill. And they had a Tuffy Lehmans Day at the Polo Grounds, December 7th, 1941.
Wow.
Get out.
Okay, so it's Tuffy Lehmans Day. They got a program, and there's an announcement made during the game.
Wow.
A military officer was summoned downstairs to call his commanding officer. Pearl Harbor had happened during the game.
Wow.
And
did they stop the game?
They did not stop the game. They didn't really announce that it happened. People, got word through, radio and stuff, but
and they probably couldn't understand the magnitude in real time.
Couldn't. And all service, for the games that were played that day, all service, military age personnel were summoned to their assignments. So it was, and that's Tuffy Lehmans Day. So it was a kind of a postscript to
it's an unbelievable story. I'm glad to know that fact now. It is.
Phil,
of course, we know the name, Tuffy Lehmans. It's kind of hard not to know it in Giant history.
Let me ask you about the two quarterbacks that come after you, and Y.A. Tittle at number 12 and Charlie Connerly on this list. You mentioned at the beginning of this you used to have catches with them, because they'd be around. Mr. Mara always had former Giants players around. But as a quarterback, what about their games that you know of? We know what Tittle did.
Yeah, Y.A. Tittle, the first thing I think about is he was Johnny Unitas of the time. Is that a good example?
Yeah.
Not that I can remember all of it, but I've watched enough and whatever, and I knew about Y.A. Tittle. And, of course, he's famous for what?
Helmet
that
off.
one photo.
Yes, head down.
It is unbelievable. And now, I know stories about him. Johnny DeZiegel, who was a trainer for the Giants. For maybe my whole career, I don't know when Johnny DeZiegel left, but he'd always tell me I'd have something going on. He goes, "Oh, quit being a baby." I'm like, "I'm not a baby. What the hell are you talking about? I think I'm fairly tough in football." He goes, "Y.A., he would have never done this." And I go, "Oh, you're going to tell me this story." He would go into a stall in the bathroom and tape himself.
Wow.
Because he didn't want any player to see him being taped and all this. And I'm going, God, it was unbelievable. But, he was really kind of a modern day quarterback in an old age. Back then they ran like two formations, and it was the same offense for every team, and it seemed like in the NFL. But, he was a big guy, threw the ball well, and even when he was 50-some years old is when we had our catch. And Pace University in training camp. And I went, damn, he can still throw pretty well too. And he was fascinated by, we talked a little bit about what I did as a quarterback. He goes, that's unbelievable. Because it had progressed somewhat, not compared. I see the same things now. With some of these guys are like, God, these offenses you run.
Y.A. Tittle connects with Joe Walton to tie the record of 7 touchdown throws in a game. Y.A. netted 505 yards as he tied the mark first set by Sid Luckman. The Giants win 49-34.
Think about Y.A. Tittle. In 1963, he set an NFL record, 36 touchdown passes thrown that season. It took until Dan Marino in '84 to break that record.
Isn't that amazing?
When you think about the quarterbacks that played in the 70s, whether it was Roger Staubach, Terry Bradshaw, Kenny Stabler,
right.
Dan Fouts, you go through the whole list of them. It's a pretty impressive record that he had.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Still the Giants' record, isn't it?
In a season.
Yes.
36.
It
right?
still is?
Yeah,
Still
I believe
is.
so.
Wow, Eli didn't beat it? Or?
No, he got to 35 a couple times.
Wow.
And then it's remarkable.
Man, that's amazing.
Especially in his passing league now.
Well, yeah, in this day and age, you think, I don't know, 36 touchdowns, I don't care how you look at it, it's a lot. So that was why, and Chuck and Charlie Connolly, couldn't be a nicer guy, kind of below the radar when he'd talk to you or whatever. He goes, I just wish you could run a little faster. And I go, that's not going to happen.
He's the Marlboro Man, by the way.
Yeah, I know the Marlboro Man. Yeah, but he was.
I don't think I knew that.
He's the Marlboro
Yeah,
Man.
he was
That
the Marlboro
commercial,
Man.
the cowboy,
Yeah.
he was the Marlboro
I think
Man.
he had one with his rolled up in the sleeves, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, it was
yeah.
rolled up. Yeah.
Smoke him if you got him.
But if you'd have saw him, you'd go, yeah, he's the Marlboro.
I don't think a lot of people know this, but he played at Ole Miss, and if you go to Oxford, there's a huge Giants fan base, and Giant games are shown in Oxford, Mississippi.
Really?
Because of Charlie Connolly, and then of course Eli.
Oh, sure.
With both of those being Ole Miss Rebels.
11-year veteran Chuck Connolly does the quarterbacking and must be rated as an all-time great. On the Browns 18, Connolly hands to Webster, who hands to Gifford on the reverse. Berry supplies the block. Frank laterals to Connolly. It's touchdown, Giants. Connolly drives an inspired team. He fakes once, twice, 3 times, then fires a 46-yarder to Bob Schnelker. Charlie Connolly evades the skins and loops a pass to Rote in the corner. Touchdown! To make it a great big Connolly day, Chuck tosses his 3rd touchdown pass to Schnelker for 34 yards. Good old number 42, the 38-year-old hero, is honored. And here he is in person. On Connolly's 2nd chance with the ball, there's no faking. Webster and Triplett block. Gifford slices in front of Albin and scores on a 28-yard shot. What a combo. Charlie Connolly makes sure of his passing championship with a 26-yard touchdown throw to Rote. Charlie Connolly throws his 3rd touchdown pass of the amazing route. Rote grabs it, and the Giants clinch the Eastern title 48-7.
Let's go to 19 on this list. Ken Strong, Hall of Famer, and this is a guy that he scored the critical touchdown in the original Sneakers game of 1934 against the Chicago Bears in the NFL Championship. He had 479 points in his career. He's a guy that kicked, ran the ball, did all those different things. It's kind of cool when you think about it, isn't it?
Well, it is cool to think about the game back then, how you had to do everything. I mean, they used to say that cliche, just to make a football team, whether you were a first-round, probably not a first-round pick, a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, etc. round pick. The more you can do, keeps you around. You know, some special teams.
Back then, and even when I was growing up, you did everything. In other words, you played every sport. You know how many times I threw a football during the off season in high school and college?
None.
Boom. I never went out, let's go out and throw and run some routes. That just never happened. We were all playing baseball, doing everybody. And I can't imagine even back then, that's why they were so well-versed being all-around athletes. You know, oh, you run the ball well, you can throw it. Well, yeah, I bet you can kick too. You want to kick? Yeah, I'll kick. You know.
Yeah, he had 479 points in his career. And when he retired, he had the most points in Giants history because he ran it, he kicked, he did everything.
That's awesome.
Remarkable.
One more name from the past, and then I have some more questions for you guys. Jimmy Patton comes in at number 20. And Jimmy Patton was as good as it gets. Emlyn Tunnell holds the franchise record for the most interception return yardage, 1,200.
That's a lot.
Jimmy Patton is second, and he's still second in the Giants' all-time list of interceptions.
It's
52.
It's incredible.
52.
What year was this?
Emlyn Tunnell.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Emlyn Tunnell. So he was drafted by the Giants in 1955, was on the 56 championship team.
That's a lot of interceptions back then. They didn't throw the ball a lot.
Right.
Yeah, he was a 5-time first-team All-Pro, once a second-team All-Pro, Pro Bowls. And, you think about Jimmy Patton and Emlyn Tunnell, and those guys were literally, Emlyn Tunnell's nickname was Mr. Offense on Defense. But Jimmy Patton was just as potent offensively for this team.
That's a remarkable, and 5-time first-team All-Pro, not in the Hall of Fame. That's like, okay.
Yeah, it's hard.
That's an oversight there. One second-team All-Pro. And I believe 52 is the number of interceptions that Deion Sanders had, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
There you want to compare it to
and he was playing 12 games back then.
Yeah.
Hadn't even gone to 14.
Yeah.
Well, it is strange. Why some people are not in the Hall of Fame always, they're trying to keep the numbers down, whatever, but I don't understand that.
Yeah, it seems like a deserving player should be in regardless.
Yeah, 1958, he had 11 picks.
I mean, that's those numbers, and I don't care what age and what time and what we think about pro football or anything like that. But, maybe someday.
Well, is it 20,000 players have been in the NFL, I believe?
Is that what? Yeah,
and it's less than 400 who are in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So it truly is this
exclusive.
It's very.
Right.
I
forget
hard
what
to get in.
Rondé's
very
number
hard to
is
get
380 something, and he was 2 classes ago, so it's
wow.
probably under 400.
Yeah.
Mr. Mara, we talked about him as a scout. Talked about both of you were fortunate enough in your careers to really get to know the man. When you first met him, what was it like for you?
It felt intimidating when I first met Mr. Mara because he was quiet, and I mean until I came out of my shell, I was quiet too. So it was comfortable, but just there's a reverence around him. He was so much about his family, and I feel so fortunate because I got asked to go up to their home when he was on his deathbed, and I walked into the end of the house, and Jeremy Shockey was leaving, and he said they're all in there, and I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, every child, every grandkid, they're all there, and before I left, I got a chance to sit by his bedside, and I said to him, Wellington, Mr. Mara, thank you for making me a Giant. My life is what it is because you gave me the opportunity, and I got to say my piece with him, and it was something I'll never, ever forget. But the memories of him coming to the practice with his little cane/chair is what I always remember. He'd just walk down, he'd go sit at the end of the field and just watch.
Yeah.
Just sit there and watch. He didn't say anything, so it wasn't like he was yelling at us or judging us or anything, but you knew he was watching.
Absolutely.
And the only time he ever spoke to the team en masse at us was right after Jim Fossil decided that he was going to stay on for the season, but he was essentially fired. And Wellington Mara gets in front of the room and says, basically, we got to win. And some of you guys aren't going to be here. Look to your right and look to your left. 2 of you aren't going to be here.
Wow.
And it was like, wow.
Wow, that's right.
It was like, you never heard him say anything.
Right.
But when he said something, it was powerful.
Yeah. I think about him all the time. Not only him, but the whole family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just amazing to see how his love and respect for the game is the whole family.
Right.
I mean, the sons, the daughters, the daughters, I mean, man, they're into it too. But my thoughts are about this Mr. Mara, our relationship. Probably it hurt me a lot of times because I felt like I was letting him down when it wasn't going well. We lost a game or didn't play a certain way. And I had such great respect for him. Back when I was playing, he'd come out, but he kept his eyes on the practice, but he would walk around the field to get his exercise in. And when he would come on the field, though, I always noticed it and go, okay, I got to tighten up a little bit here. Let's be careful what I say and let's make sure I do the right thing. So his presence, without talking, was tremendous. And I don't know, I feel bad that I didn't show as much appreciation as I probably should as I was playing.
I don't think we knew how.
Yeah, no,
I don't think we knew what to do.
I loved shaking his hand after we won.
Yeah.
He'd shake my hand after losses too. But I did, it was just something, I could see it.
Right, he walked
And I won't
through the
even
locker
say
room.
what teams if we beat. He loved that handshake. You know, like it was, you know what I mean? There was a couple there. He took personal,
Right.
and it was real. And
Whoop, Dallas.
right?
But you're right about the family, Phil. Like everybody in the family.
Oh.
You feel like an extension of him.
Yes.
Through all of his kids and his grandkids. LeVar Arrington said this, who formerly was with Washington, and he came to the Giants, and he was here for a year or so, and then he tore his Achilles, and, his career ended. But I remember having this conversation with him. He said, Teak, you know what the difference is between here and Washington? He said, when you talk to somebody in Washington, they don't really care. When you talk to somebody here, that person could be the owner.
Yeah.
Right? Or it's the extension of the owner. The
Right.
family is everywhere. And that's one of the things I'm so grateful for, is to get close to them. In particular, one of his grandkids, Tim McDonald, who is here now.
Sure.
And I had so many interesting games in my career. There's only one that I remember every moment of, and that was the game after Wellington passed away.
Oh.
We played Washington at home, and it was one of my greatest games, 200 and plus yards, and I scored a touchdown on my last play of the game, and I took that football and I ran it over to Timmy, and I gave it to him. I said, this is for you and for your family and your grandfather. Thank you for letting me be a Giant. And we destroyed them that day, but it was my last play of the game, and I mean, it was the only way I could honor him.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful remembrance. Phil, in 92 training camp, there was a rumor that you were going to go be traded to San Diego.
Was there?
Yeah. So Wellington Mara, he didn't talk much to the press, but when he did, he made news. He marched into the press room. He says, excuse me, I have something to say. I've seen in the papers that Phil Simms might be on the move to be traded. I'm going to say this right now, right here, right now. He is not being traded today, tomorrow, this month, this year, or in the 20th century. Thank you. And he walked out.
Wow.
That was
Oh,
good.
it was phenomenal.
To the point.
He did two walk-offs. He did that, and when Bavaro was released, he stormed in, and he was very angry, and he made it very clear that that was not his decision. But as the owner, he would allow his football people to handle the operation. I'll never forget that. Never saw Mr. Mara that mad on that day with Bavaro.
I can see why. You know, because, you know, just talking about Mark, all that he did and all he sacrificed in his life and everything to be the player that he was. And, of course, you can't do anything. I can imagine for an owner, you just can't show enough appreciation to players sometimes for what they do and what they sacrifice.
Gentlemen, this has been awesome. Bob, appreciate
Thank
your
you.
work as part of being this 13-member Blue Ribbon panel to help us get to this point. Phil, Tiki, awesome stuff. Thank you so much.
Great to be a part of it.
Thank
you
you
so much.
Make sure you continue to follow the Giants on all their social media platforms as we continue our countdown to #1 and looking at the top 100 Giants in the history of the franchise. Thanks for joining us for Giants Top 100 Players presented by Bud Light.